The silence in that house was a kind of noise that hurt. Not the usual hush of lazy mornings or peaceful nights, but the kind that screams in the corners, echoing longing. Since Vanessa's death, the home that once rang with laughter, hurried footsteps, and the clatter of pots in the kitchen now seemed swallowed by a cold, thick fog. Daniel, eyes sunken and beard unkempt, wandered through the living room clutching a coffee mug that had gone cold hours ago. He was trying. Every morning was a battle between what needed to be done and what his body, heavy with grief, would allow. Matthew and Alice, his 5-year-old twins, spent their days in silence, as if they'd been pulled into a world where their mum was still around, even if only in their thoughts. Daniel had tried everything: child psychologists, occupational therapists, new toys. Nothing made the kids eat. The plate of rice and beans sat untouched. The mashed banana dried out on the saucer. The silence at the table was as thick as the morning they shared. Then, as a last resort, Daniel decided to try one more nanny. Anna arrived on a grey Tuesday afternoon. She wore a light blouse and a long braid draped over her shoulder. She carried nothing but a small backpack and a gentle smile. Her eyes were alert, the kind that notice what isn't said. Daniel greeted her with the formality of someone who didn't expect much, but his gaze lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary. "They're in their room. Don't worry about pushing anything, just be with them if you can," he said, before disappearing behind a stack of reports in his office. Anna climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the floor creak beneath her feet. She knocked softly on the blue bedroom door and was met by Matthew and Alice's curious stares. They sat on the floor, playing with pieces of an unfinished puzzle. "Hi, I'm Anna. Can I play with you?" The twins didn't reply, but they didn't push her away either. It was a start. At the end of the day, Anna came downstairs to make something simple: white rice, shredded chicken, and steamed veggies. She set the table with care, decorating the plates with tiny heart-shaped carrot slices. She called the children in a sweet voice, and they came, sitting at the table without a word. She served the food, but neither of them touched their utensils. Daniel watched from a distance, leaning against the doorframe, his shoulders tense. Another failed attempt. But Anna didn't press. She simply observed. Her eyes followed every gesture the twins made, every subtle movement. She saw when Matthew glanced sideways at his sister and slipped something under his shirt. She saw when Alice, in silent complicity, tucked a piece of chicken into her shorts pocket. She said nothing. She waited for dinner to end, or rather to be ignored, and helped the children upstairs. Later, alone in their room while tidying toys, she noticed a shoebox under the bed. Curious, she pulled it out carefully. When she opened it, the sour smell of spoiled food filled the air. Inside the box lay dried clumps of rice, carrot scraps, and a hardened piece of meat, all wrapped in colorful napkins. Anna felt a lump in her throat. It wasn't filth. It was hope. A child's painful hope. She closed the box, but that image stayed burned in her mind. The next morning, she waited for Daniel to have his coffee and then called him to talk. They sat in the kitchen with shy sunlight filtering through the window. "Daniel, I found something yesterday. A shoebox in the kids' room. They were saving food every day." Daniel frowned, confused. "Saving?" "Yes. They think Vanessa might come back, and that she'll be hungry." He froze. The coffee slipped from his fingers and spilled on the floor, splattering the tiles. But he didn't move. Tears welled in his eyes. It was as if, for the first time, grief tore through his armor. "They think she could still come back?" Anna nodded slowly. Daniel buried his face in his hands. He cried. He cried in a way he hadn't since the funeral, quiet sobs, as if apologizing for not protecting his children from pain. Anna approached and laid a light hand on his shoulder. "They're not hungry, Daniel. They're scared. And in their own way, they're trying to take care of Mom. Later that day, Anna called the twins to the kitchen. She grabbed 2 plates, tinted the rice with beet puree, and arranged the beans into smiling faces. You know, when we eat, we get strong. And when we're strong and happy down here, Mom up in heaven is happy too. She looks down and thinks, my babies are okay. Alice glanced at her brother. Matthew bit his lower lip, thoughtful. Do you guys want to make Mom smile up there? Slowly, they nodded. For the first time in weeks, they picked up their utensils. Bite by bite, the broken bond began to mend. Daniel, standing in the doorway, watched. He saw his children eating. He saw Anna smiling at them, her eyes full of care. And he felt, perhaps for the first time in a long while, that life, no matter how silent and painful, could still hold a spark of hope. In that moment he knew Anna wasn't just another nanny. She was the first sliver of light in the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. The day after the dinner where Matthew and Alice started eating again, something imperceptible had shifted in the air. It was subtle, almost like the first breeze before a change of season. But Anna felt it. The house, though still quiet, no longer felt suffocating. There was still pain, yes, but now mixed with a spark of curiosity. She noticed it in the way Alice glanced at the pot on the stove, or in how Matthew stood in the kitchen doorway, sniffing the air with an intrigued look. That's when Anna made up her mind. This house needed smell, memory, flavor. It needed life pulsing through its pots and pans, and she knew exactly where to find it. That afternoon she slipped out quietly and returned with a small packet of tapioca flour, a bag of fresh cassava starch, and a jar of artisanal coconut milk. When Daniel saw her arranging everything on the counter, he just raised an eyebrow in curiosity. You cooking something? I'm going to try. I want the house to smell like good memories. It can help more than we imagine. He just nodded, unsure how to respond. It was still strange for him to see someone so eager. But deep down, there was something comforting about the way Anna moved around the kitchen. Before long, the house began to transform. First came the scent of melted manteiga de garrafa sizzled in the skillet. Then the crackle of the tapioca pancake forming. Anna worked her hands with precision and care, as though she were stitching flavors into the air. The children appeared, drawn by the aroma. They climbed onto the kitchen stools, eyes wide. What is that? Matthew asked, tilting his head. Tapioca. Back in the Northeast, we eat it all the time. It's like a little flatbread, but made with love and longing, she replied with a smile. Alice reached out to touch the still warm tapioca, enchanted by its texture. Anna offered them one topped with coconut and condensed milk. The two tasted it with hesitation, then beamed. It's sweet, Alice said, her eyes shining in a way Daniel hadn't seen in months. That week, Anna turned the kitchen into an affection lab. She made cinnamon-sugared student cookies, couscous topped with coalho cheese, and even a corn porridge that reminded her of her grandmother's Saint Jouin nights. The children began to help. They sprinkled flour, cracked eggs, sometimes dropping pieces on the floor, and laughed. They laughed out loud. They laughed together. It was a sweet mess, as if the kitchen had become a playground where the toys were pots and wooden spoons. Daniel, down the hall, would stop whatever he was doing to listen to their laughter. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, a good kind of disorientation. One evening he paused at the doorway and watched silently. Anna had flour dusted across her face, showing Alice how to crack an egg without smashing the shell. Matthew held a small plate of ingredients while bobbing awkwardly to some tune. It was a scene he thought he'd never see again. Life, joy, the smell of a real home. And then a memory hit him. Vanessa, in her crumpled apron, laughing at herself for botching a cheese bread recipe. The kids smeared in chocolate after an afternoon of making brigadeiros. That kitchen used to be a temple of love, but now it felt reborn in the hands of another woman. The next morning, Anna called the children to prepare something special. "Today we're making carne seca escondidinho, but I need an important helper," she said, looking straight at the two little ones. "We'll help!" Matthew responded, excited. "But do you think you can convince Daddy to cook with us?" Alice dashed through the house calling for her father. Daniel, surprised, showed up in the kitchen with his phone still in hand. "What's up, sweetheart? Come on, Anna said she needs your help." Daniel hesitated. He glanced at the clock, at his phone, at the pot on the stove, and then at his daughter's hopeful eyes. "All right, but I'm terrible at cooking, you know." Anna greeted him with a patient smile. "No one starts out knowing everything, but it's easier when we do it together." It was clumsy at first. Daniel fumbled with the potatoes, nearly dropping the casserole dish, and sent a cloud of flour onto the floor. But the twins laughed so hard that it turned into a celebration. Anna taught them to make the creamy puree and the savory shredded beef, filling with red onion and chopped parsley. Each layer they built was like laying brick in rebuilding a home that was slowly starting to feel warm again. By the time the oven was on and the aroma filled every corner, Daniel wiped his hands on his apron and looked at his kids. "I think it's good, right?" "It smells like happiness," Matthew said. Daniel laughed, and that laughter carried more than relief. It was a sign that something inside him was loosening, an old pain, but now a little less sharp. As they all sat down to eat together, for the first time since the funeral, Anna watched quietly. She knew grief still lived there. But for the first time, it seemed to share space with something new, and that something tasted like warm food and smelled like sorrow turned into love. The kitchen clock still read 8 in the morning, but the smell of fresh coffee and homemade cheese bread already filled every corner of the house. Sunlight, filtered through the curtains, painted golden stripes across the freshly set table. There, sitting side by side, Matthew and Alice ate with the appetite of children who were finally allowing themselves to live again. Daniel watched the scene with a mix of gratitude and surprise. A family breakfast like this was something he no longer believed possible, not after the dark hole they'd fallen into since Vanessa's passing. But now, there was conversation. There were good mornings. There was Anna. A new routine was beginning to take root. Meals were eaten together, chores were shared, and the children, growing more comfortable each day, called Anna Aunt Anna. So naturally, it even surprised her. "Aunt Anna, are we making that corn cake again today?" Alice asked, her eyes shining. "If Daddy helps stir the batter, yes," she replied, winking at Daniel. He laughed. "I'm practically a professional baker now." Anna smiled with a lightness that wasn't just relief at seeing the kids well. There was something more there, a quiet sense of belonging, as if she, too, was beginning to build something new for herself. That afternoon, Daniel decided to dig out some old photo albums from the back of the living room cabinet. He missed Vanessa, and as painful as it was, he also knew the children needed to remember their mother with warmth, not fear. He found pictures from trips and birthday parties, and among them one that froze him for a moment. Vanessa, sweating in a floral apron with flour on her face, holding the twins as babies. All of them laughing in front of a crooked carrot cake. He carried the photo to the kitchen. "Anna, did you know Vanessa loved to cook too?" She paused mid-task and looked at the photo, handling it gently. "You can see she was an amazing mom." "She was," Daniel replied, his voice catching. "Sometimes I think I'll never measure up to what she was for them." Anna folded down her dish towel and looked him in the eye. "You don't have to be what she was. You just have to be here. And you are, every single day." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was as if they were both saying, without words, that they understood each other's pain. Later, while the children played in the yard, Daniel offered her some tea. They sat on the porch, the sky streaked with orange and lavender. "You moved here from Fortaleza, right?" he asked, curious for the first time. Anna took a deep breath, watching the leaves rustle in the garden before she answered. "Yes, I was going to get married there, to a guy named Ryan. We'd been together 4 years, but on our wedding day he never showed up." Daniel choked slightly on his tea. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "Almost no one knows. I stood there in my wedding dress, listening to the silence in that church, my parents, the guests, all waiting for something that never happened. After that, I couldn't breathe in that city anymore." Daniel nodded, still absorbing the weight of her story. "And you decided to come here?" "Honestly, I was trying to run away, but I ended up finding you." Their eyes met. There was no romance in that look, at least not yet, but there was a deep respect, built on the mortar of shared grief. "Sometimes all we need is a place where we can start over," she said. Daniel gave a sad, knowing smile. "And sometimes we just need someone who isn't afraid to walk into a house full of ghosts." Anna laughed, a light, genuine laugh, like the first one in a long time. That night, they had chicken and corn escondidinho with sweet potato mash. Matthew insisted on telling a joke during dinner. Alice made a face at the cilantro, and Daniel pretended to jot it down in an imaginary notebook. Anna laughed along. It wasn't the family they once were, but perhaps, Daniel thought, it was a new version still being written. With each spoonful, each smile and each shared story, the house that had been so grey began to take on new colours, and more importantly, new smells, of freshly baked bread, of sweet herbal tea, of grief healing under the invisible power of the kitchen. Daniel woke before his alarm that morning. The bedroom was plunged in darkness, but his mind was already restless. For days, he'd felt a strange tightness in his chest. Not exactly pain, but a silent squeeze that tightened every time he looked at Anna. It wasn't discomfort at her presence. Quite the opposite. It was what she was beginning to represent. And that frightened him. Anna, with her constant gentleness, had become part of this home as naturally as sunlight slipping through the curtains at dawn. She was present in every detail, in the seasoning of the food, in the children's smiles, in the light touch on his shoulder when everything felt too hard. And he was smiling again, laughing even, watching TV with the kids, making plans for the weekend. And then came the guilt. How could someone who had loved so deeply allow himself to be happy again? Daniel began pulling away. First, he stopped helping in the kitchen. Then he started coming home later, blaming extra work. Anna noticed, of course. Her expression remained calm, but there was something fading in her eyes, a kind of unspoken sadness that weighed on the air. The children asked, "Daddy isn't coming to dinner with us tonight?" Anna would give them a gentle excuse. "He must be busy, but he'll be here tomorrow, okay?" Matthew and Alice ate, but they didn't smile like before. Their father's absence, again, hollowed out the dinner table. Daniel watched it all from a distance. He knew he was running away. He knew he was sabotaging himself, but it was easier to dive into spreadsheets than confront what he felt. Easier to hide behind reports than allow himself to love again. Then, as if fate's judgment, Alice fell ill. It started with a low fever and a brief malaise. Anna noticed her feverish skin, her tired eyes. She gave her a lukewarm bath, made some tea, and laid her down to rest. But during the night the fever spiked. Alice vomited, crying weakly, clutching her pillow. Daniel, who had come home late and slept in his office, raced in at the sound of his daughter's cries. He found Anna sitting on the bed, Alice in her lap, trying to soothe her. "What happened?" he cried, frantic. "It's a fever. Could just be a virus, Daniel. I already called the pediatric on call." But Daniel couldn't hear that. He was exhausted, emotionally unbalanced, and angry. Not at the situation, but at himself, at his own helplessness. "This is because of those weird foods you've been cooking, isn't it?" he snapped harshly. "All these exotic recipes. You should be more careful." Anna froze. It felt like a slap, not for the words themselves, but for the unfair judgment, the ingratitude, the tone. "I care for your children with my heart, Daniel," she said, eyes brimming. "I would never give them anything harmful." "But you did! Look at her!" "This is a virus, Daniel. Kids get sick. It has nothing to do with food. You know that." Her voice trembled, but she stayed firm. Daniel fell silent. The look they exchanged was a minefield of pride and regret. That same night at the hospital, the pediatrician examined Alice patiently. After a few quick tests and a shot to bring down her fever, he delivered calm news. "It's a common virus. We're seeing outbreaks all over town. Nothing to worry about." Daniel stood in the hallway in silence. Anna sat nearby in a chair, not looking at him. When they got home and Alice slept under careful watch, Anna began packing her things. She made no scene, said nothing. She folded each piece of clothing, every personal item she'd scattered around the house, with quiet care. Daniel appeared at the doorway. "Anna," he began. "I understand, Daniel," she interrupted, not angry, but in pain. "You're afraid. I was too. But what you did today, it was unfair. I was just—" He tried to excuse himself. "I know. But you had no right to take it out on me. I was here. I always have been. I never wanted anyone's place. I only wanted to help." He stepped forward, but she stepped back. "You don't trust me, Daniel. And without trust, there's no space to stay." The next morning, when the twins woke, Anna was already gone. Daniel made breakfast alone. The eggs burned, the milk boiled over. Matthew shuffled into the kitchen in his pajamas, half asleep. "Where's Aunt Anna?" Daniel swallowed hard. She had to go away, sweetheart." Alice, face still drawn, climbed into her father's arms, but it was a sad hug. A hug that demanded answers he didn't know how to give. That night, the house fell silent again. Not the heavy silence of grief, but the hush of a fresh loss, of a living absence. Daniel sat at the empty table, clutching the photo of Vanessa he'd left on the sideboard. Beside it lay the lid of the shoebox where the twins had hidden their food. He traced the photo with his fingertips, then buried his head in his hands. For the first time, he didn't cry for his wife. He cried for having driven away the only person who had brought the house back to life. And in that moment, he knew he'd made a mistake that might cost him the chance to truly start over. Anna took the last blouse from the closet and folded it carefully. There was something deeply symbolic in that gesture. She wasn't just packing her clothes. She was tucking away memories, little pieces of affection that had spread through the house like a subtle but unforgettable perfume. Outside the bedroom, the sound of toys had fallen silent. Matthew and Alice realized something was wrong. Within moments they stood at the doorway, eyes wide, staring at the open suitcase on the bed. "Aunt Anna, are you leaving?" Anna tried to smile, but her voice caught. She swallowed back tears before answering. "I have to go, my loves." "But we don't want you to go," Matthew said, his eyes already misting over. Alice ran to the bed and wrapped her arms tightly around Anna's leg. "We love you, Aunt Anna. Please stay." Anna dropped to her knees, cradling them both at once, feeling the weight and sweetness of their unconditional love. Daniel appeared soon after. He watched the scene, frozen in place. His heart ached, a lump in his throat, regret etched on every line of his face. "Anna..." She turned slowly. Her eyes still hurt, but there was no anger, only exhaustion. Daniel took a step forward, then another, stopping just a few feet from her. He drew in a steadying breath. "You're not just the nanny. You never were." Anna looked away. her fingers tightening on the suitcase zipper. "Daniel, please listen," he interrupted, his voice thick. "I know I was wrong. I hurt you. I was unfair about everything you've done for this house. But it's because—" He stopped as if the words burned on his tongue. "I was afraid. Afraid of feeling alive again. Afraid of betraying Vanessa's memory by being happy. By falling for you." Anna closed her eyes. His words struck her like lightning, warm and painful at once. "Daniel, don't say that if it's not true. It is true." He stepped closer. "You brought life back to this home. You brought the smell of home-cooked meals, the sound of laughter, the warmth of hugs at the end of the day. You brought color. I don't know what this is or what to call it, but I know it's more than gratitude." Anna met his gaze, hesitant. Her eyes spoke volumes. She loved him, but she didn't want to be a stand-in. She didn't want to fill someone else's absence. "Do you feel this for me, or for the idea of the family I helped rebuild?" Daniel knelt before her. He took her hands gently in his. "I want you to stay, but not as an employee, not as part of some convenient arrangement. I want you to stay as part of our family, for real." The twins, still clinging to Anna, nodded with tearful eyes. "Stay, Aunt Anna. Stay with us forever," Alice whispered. Anna looked at the three of them. A broken man, but sincere. Two children with open hearts, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Certainty. She hugged the little ones, then lifted her eyes to Daniel's. "I'm not going anywhere." His breath caught. "You're going to stay?" She smiled, and it was a brand new smile. A smile of someone who's chosen to love without fear. "I'm staying, not as your nanny, but as what we're building together, with honesty." Daniel pulled her into a long embrace, a silent hug where everything was said without words. In that moment, there were no titles, no pasts, no promises. There was only a real, profound feeling. Anna, Daniel, Matthew, Alice, a foursome bound by a new, unbreakable bond. And for the first time, the house was more than a shelter. It had become a home. The scent of freshly baked cheese bread drifted out the open kitchen window. The flower-filled yard let in the song of birds, and a gentle breeze danced with the curtains. The clock read 7 in the evening, but the house felt more alive than ever before. And at the center of the living room, around a table set with blooms from the garden, a new tradition was blossoming. Dinners now had color. There were bright glasses, embroidered napkins, plates overflowing with affection. Anna cooked recipes with the twins' help, and Daniel, laughing at his own mishaps, was already daring to experiment with seasoning. Home ceased to be a concept. It became a daily practice. Anna and Daniel had decided to stay together, quietly, without rush. Their relationship had grown out of shared days, shared grief, and a slow-growing admiration. Their love wasn't fiery, it was comforting, a gentle flame, simmering a real-life story. A lighter, Daniel played with his children again, planned park weekends and read bedtime stories. At night, he'd run his fingers through Anna's hair, feeling for the first time in a long while that the world could be good again. One warm evening, while the children slept and Anna watered the backyard plants, Daniel approached. The lights strung in the trees swayed like enchanted fireflies. "I don't know the right way to do this," he began, a bit nervous. Anna looked up at him, watering can in hand. "Do what?" He took her hands gently. "Ask you to marry me." Her eyes widened in surprise, but he pressed on before she could speak. "I'm not talking about a wedding to seal a pretty story. I mean wanting to share my life with you, share the garden, kitchen slip-ups, our fears and rainy Sundays. I love you, and I love what we've become here." Anna was silent for a few heartbeats, her eyes filled with tears. Then she broke into a wide smile. That's already the right way, Daniel. He pulled a simple ring out of his pocket, tied to a red thread. Alice helped me make it. She said you don't care about expensive jewelry. Anna laughed and cried at the same time. It was the most honest, beautiful proposal she'd ever received. I'll marry you. Days later, the garden was transformed into a simple altar. Neighbors brought flowers, Daniel fashioned an arch of branches and fabric, and the kids helped bake the cakes. Matthew and Alice, wearing colorful outfits and beaming, walked down the grass as junior attendants, each carrying a small bouquet of rosemary and lavender. Anna strolled through the lawn in a white cotton dress, barefoot. Her belly was already rounding under the light fabric, a sign that a new chapter was writing itself not just in her heart, but in her body as well. Daniel waited for her, eyes both serene and full of wonder. Their vows were simple, no microphones, no long speeches, just real words, shared between smiles and discreet tears. You are the home where my heart now lives, Anna whispered, voice trembling. And you are the recipe I never imagined, but now can't live without, Daniel replied. The little ceremony ended with laughter, hugs, and a communal lunch of clay pot dishes. Couscous, dried beef, green bean salad, and bolo de rolo for dessert. The long wooden table welcomed everyone, especially Love. In the days that followed, the house remained vibrant. Now, with Anna officially there as partner and mother, her pregnancy visible, hopes for a new cycle swelled along with her belly. Daniel watched it all in peaceful contentment. His grief for Vanessa hadn't vanished, but it had transformed into a tender memory, a sweet longing present in small moments. A coffee mug left on a shelf, an old note found in a book, the way Alice brushed her hair. Vanessa would always be part of the story, but the present was full, and the future pulsed in Anna's womb, in the twins' laughter, in the smell of beans simmering on the stove. The house that was once silence and sorrow was now music and spice. It was home. It was love, served in generous spoonfuls, every single day. 18 months had passed since that garden wedding. Time had flowed like a gentle river, rounding smooth bends, stumbling over a few stones, but always moving forward. The house was more alive than ever. Toys scattered across the yard, the scent of warm milk in the morning, and a new sound filling every room with tenderness, the cry of a newborn baby. Samuel, their third child, was the latest light in this family, a symbol of all that had been rebuilt with love, patience, and courage. But on this particular day, a different kind of birth was about to take place. Anna stood before the small restaurant's facade, her heart racing. The freshly installed sign still smelled of paint, grandma's flavors, light wood, hand-painted letters, an embroidered detail in the corner. It was simple, but it carried a whole story. "Ready?" Daniel asked from behind her, cradling Samuel. "Ready and trembling inside," she replied with a nervous smile. Today was the big day. The fulfillment of a dream that began long before São Paulo, long before even Daniel. It began with the aromas in her grandmother's house, back in Fortaleza, Sundays of couscous and corn cake, clay pot stews, and the drip-drip of strong coffee. Now all of that was coming to life between walls decorated with love. As they stepped inside, guests were greeted by an atmosphere that felt like a hug. Family photos hung on the walls. Matthew and Alice as toddlers, their backyard wedding, Anna's pregnancy belly. There were black and white images of her grandmother, wooden spoon in hand, like a scepter. The space was warm and inviting. Rustic wooden tables, little pots of fresh herbs as centerpieces, lace curtains. An open kitchen let customers breathe in the aromas, hear the sizzle of the pans, and watch every step of meal preparation. And the dishes, oh the dishes, tapioca pancakes with melted butter and coalho cheese, shredded beef escondidinho topped with pumpkin puree, rice cooked in coconut milk with free-range chicken, guava-swirled bolo de rolo, and the famous cinnamon sugar student cookies, the very sweets that had won over Alice and Matthew in those first tough weeks. The restaurant quickly filled. Friends, neighbors, curious passers-by. But what touched everyone most wasn't just the food, it was the feeling in the room. Everyone seemed to know they weren't just here to eat, they were here to feel. Mid-lunch, Matthew and Alice darted to the counter where Anna was taking orders. "Mommy!" Alice called out excitedly. "The lady at table 3 wants more couscous." Anna froze. The world held its breath for a moment. Daniel, hearing his daughter's spontaneous shout, dropped his fork and looked up. "What?" Anna asked, surprised. "The lady wants more couscous, Mommy," Matthew repeated, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Anna brought a hand to her heart. It was the first time she'd ever heard that "mommy" come out so effortlessly, so truly. She knelt down and opened her arms. The two kids flung themselves into her embrace. "You two mean everything to me," she whispered, tears mingling with her smiles. Daniel watched with tears in his eyes. Samuel slept peacefully in his arms, blissfully unaware but entirely part of this living moment. That night, after the first day's service had wound down, Anna stayed behind in the dining room, switching off lights and straightening tables. Daniel slipped in quietly, wrapped his arms around her waist, and kissed her shoulder. "It was perfect." "It was more than that," she replied. "It was real." He turned her to face him, gazing into her eyes. "You've turned pain into place, into space, into flavor. You've given love a name." Anna smiled, resting her forehead against his. "And you gave me a home." Outside, the Grandma's Flavors sign swayed gently in the night breeze. Behind it, an entire family was beginning the most beautiful of new beginnings. Night had fallen softly over Grandma's Flavors. The grand opening had been a success, and now, with the lights dimmed and the last customers departing, only the echo of cheerful conversations, the scent of still warm pots, and a light sense of mission accomplished remained. Anna was clearing the last dishes with the help of an employee when she heard the door open again. She assumed it was a distracted patron, but when she looked up, she froze. It was him, Ryan, the past, flesh and bone, standing before the present she had built. He wore a well-fitted suit, and his hair was cut just as she remembered. But there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, genuine regret. In his hands, a small bouquet of white roses. "Hi, Anna." She drew a steadying breath, dried her hands on her apron, and walked toward him with purposeful steps. "Ryan, I heard about the opening. I had to come. Not to ruin anything, just to say what I never said." She didn't answer. She just stared at him in silence. "I was cowardly. I have no excuses. Leaving you at the altar was the biggest mistake of my life. I've carried that guilt ever since. I thought coming here, seeing you, maybe it would help me understand what I lost." Anna crossed her arms, her posture calm but firm. "You lost the chance to live a beautiful story with me. But it wasn't my end, Ryan. It was just the end of a chapter." He swallowed hard. "I just wanted to ask your forgiveness." She nodded kindly. "You're forgiven. Truly." He forced a sad smile. You seem happy." Anna glanced toward the back of the dining room, where Daniel stood silently, holding Matthew and with Alice sleeping on the bench beside him. "I am. Something about you has changed. You seem lighter." Anna smiled, but her voice was steady. "That's because I live in a place where love is real, where there's no doubt or fear. And that place is my home, Ryan, my family, not just this restaurant." He nodded slowly, understanding. There was no room for him here. And somehow this time it didn't hurt. It was simply what needed to happen. "You're part of a life I no longer belong in." That's what she said, with tenderness and resolve. Ryan offered a respectful smile, bowed his head, and silently walked away. Anna stood for a moment, watching the door close behind him. Then she turned and walked to her family. Daniel looked at her with a mixture of admiration and care. She sat beside him, took his hand, and rested her head on his shoulder. "It was Ryan," she whispered. "I saw," he replied, offering no judgment. "I thought I'd feel anger or fear, but I felt nothing, only gratitude, because if he hadn't walked away, I would never have found my way here." Daniel kissed her forehead. "You found where love lives." Anna looked at their children. Alice slept curled against her leg. Matthew, eyes half open, still clutched his favorite toy. She touched her pregnant belly, feeling the baby stir inside. And for the first time, without pain, hesitation, or guilt, she looked up at Daniel with eyes full of certainty. "I love you." Daniel smiled, a calm smile, the kind you wear when your heart is at peace. Outside, the street was quiet. The imaginary camera panned back slowly, through the window, capturing a scene of simplicity and wholeness. A family gathered around a table, the aroma of food in the air, arms entwined, and a love now with a home, a name, and roots. A new story had begun, and it was beautiful. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you in the next video.